Hey everybody, welcome to Poduty in the News for Tuesday, February 24th, 2026. We're at the Poduty Live Podcast Theater, downtown Tarentum, Pennsylvania on Corbett Street. I've got Dr. Trudy Beerman joining me tonight, CEO of PSI TV Network and the creator of REACHology. We're going to learn all about that after the theme song.
What time is it? What time is it? It's time for Poduty and the News. Poduty and the News. The only live news podcast about podcasting from the stage. Poduty and the News. Poduty and the News. The only live news podcast about podcasting from the stage.
Poduty and the news.
Poduty in the News. Dr. Trudy, welcome to the show.
Welcome, Jeff. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. That song often gets my guests out of their seats, gets the blood pumping. It is a Tuesday night, but you wouldn't know it here with all the energy in the room. Joining all the way from the CEO of PSI TV, Dr. Trudy, tell us a little bit about this TV network. I've been seeing so much about it. We were talking about some of the stories that we selected for tonight, and I just think you're going to have such a great perspective on some of these. Tell us about what you're doing and what you're building.
Think podcast on TV. So PSI TV, we interview experts, and we have a channel presence on Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire, and Vita TV. And then once we've interviewed the guests, we do repurpose it and push it out to our podcast, which is Treadmill Tracks for Leaders of Brands. And then we also put it out to Influence Media News and other publications of the social and stuff like that.
Well, tell us a little bit about the REACHology. I was learning about it, trying to figure out, get my head wrapped around it. It's a pretty cool concept of especially tying in your background with the business strategy background and REACHology. Tell us about the REACHology system.
So yes, it is a system. Absolutely, it is a system. REACHology, I have the trademark for that word, Jeff, and I've defined it. So, with the era of influencers and influencers being determined by their follower base, influential reach has become generally understood to be how many followers do you have? And the bigger the number of followers, the bigger the influence you're perceived to be. The problem for me in my space, working with experts, is that is not how I am defining influential reach. Because the original understanding of influence is your ability to persuade. And a lot of influencers, which is a noun for these people, are not necessarily having any influence beyond the fact that they get a lot of attention. So influencers today are attention hogs. They get a lot of attention. They put on a bikini, they do a prank, whatever the case may be, they are definitely attracting attention. But experts who have true influence expertise may not actually have an audience or a very vast audience. So what happens a lot of times is people like us will go to the influencers and ask them to share our influential content with their expanded audience. So I defined influential reach as think of that big fish in a small pond, that expert who has a small audience base, expanding that audience base where they have actual influence over the expanded audience. So for that definition, I just coined the word REACHology and got the trademark for it. And there it is a system because it explains how we're going to, well, it doesn't explain it, but it captures the essence of how what we do over here to orchestrate experts getting and building that influential reach.
It's a great concept. And is there a way for people to talk to you and figure out maybe what their REACHology score is, or or how big of a reach that they have? What's the way for a professional to figure out, how big of a reach they have?
I'm glad you asked that question because a lot of experts think, oh, my work should speak for me. And they will have real influence offline. So like in your experience where you at your stage and you fill the room with people, that is an offline real influential action. So when somebody can get people in the room, they do have influence, but usually that audience is small. So when they go digital, they open up that audience to the world. The thing is that when experts have real life expertise, so for example, when I got my doctorate, what I had to do was to go to LinkedIn, for example, and update LinkedIn from saying Trudy Beerman MA to Trudy Beerman DSL. So once we have these real life, real world experiences, credentials, publications, if the digital world is not aware of it, we're digitally invisible. And so the experts the REACHology score helps the expert to identify the gap. So I really have my doctorate, but the internet doesn't know. So it shows you the gaps and it shows you what is real, but what is not visible online. It creates that report. It shows us the lowest hanging fruit as to where to go first to try and really build that authoritative depth in the digital world.
It's incredible. I love hearing about it. I love learning these new perspectives, these new ways to reach communities, the new ways to share your knowledge, and you're really honing in on that. And if people wanted to reach out and connect to you and learn about the PSI TV network, is there a dedicated place you like to send people to?
Well, absolutely. They can go to psitvnetwork.com. Absolutely.
That's super easy. We'll put the links in the show notes. And everybody who's on the show on Poduty in the News, we have a crew page. So all my guests, all their links, their bio, that's all going to be on the pod, not only on the show notes for this episode, but there's going to be a dedicated page. So if Dr. Trudy comes back on future episodes, you'll get to see all the episodes that Dr. Trudy was ever on, and all the links, all those connections. Follow those links, support the guests that come on the show. It means the world to us because they're helping us build this new medium of live podcasting, and they're here to support what you're doing, and you can also return the favor by supporting what they're doing. And
well, Jeff, if you're doing that, let me tell your audience, that is a huge thing because when you create those backlinks, and media mentions are powerful authoritative backlinks, so it's not just a podcast experience, it's not just exposure to a new audience, but when you have that dedicated page and those backlinks from the guest to your audience, that is doing much, much more at the authoritative depth level than you probably even realize. So kudos to you.
yeah, it's that theory of we used to say 30 years ago, if a tree falls in the woods and no one's there to hear it, doesn't make a sound. That really applies to what you do online and offline. You mentioned I may do a presentation at a college, but if it's not recorded and it's not put online, then Google doesn't know about it. The algorithms don't know about it. And what Dr. Tree's talking about is so important. Make sure that the things that you do, you're feeding it to online, to your profiles on social media. And that's one of the reasons I do this backlink page with my guests is I'm showing them, positioning them as professionals with knowledge in the entertainment industry. I show the shows that they're talking on, and we give links back to them. So, that ecosystem of professionalism is what I'm trying to give back. They're going to also link back to the show, and we're going to elevate. And that we said it earlier today: rising tide lifts all ships, and that's what these backlinks are for, to show that expertise, to share our knowledge with one another.
PSI TV does the same thing, so you'll see yours as well.
That's awesome. Are you ready to get into our first story?
Oh, well, let's go.
Well, here we go. This is a hidden brain. It's going on the road with a live stop in my home state of Pennsylvania at the Miller Theater, and it's been a decade-long exploring psychological and behavior science through audio. Now they're translating those insights into a live theater experience built around storytelling, research, and interaction. It's the Hidden Brain podcast. And things like this. This is taking that idea that you maybe thought of in your home basement, your home studio. You started recording something, And then 10 years later, you've built that community, you've built that audience, and now you're able to take that on the road. You've recorded videos, you've recorded podcasts. Now you're taking it in front of an audience. I think this was a 10-stop tour that's coming up too, a multi-city tour. And to me, that's the best part of doing these podcasts. And what Dr. Tree's talking about, showing your expertise. Well, this Hidden Brain podcast has developed such a community that their community trusts them enough to come out and buy tickets. So I want to throw this back to you, Dr. Trudy. How do you see this touring kind of transforming the podcast movement? How do you see this as a form of entertainment for really making that connection with your audience?
Well, Jeff, honestly, your Poduty show is not too far off from that concept, to be honest. So touring is an amazing concept, and honestly, I may adopt that idea as well. For someone to fill a theater and have, as you say, a community that is showing up in these different towns is moving that expert from being a big fish in a small pond to really expanding that influential reach. They are in real time having an impact on an audience, and I bet any money that show is not just the live audience. Somehow they'll have a stream feed or something, or they'll have a video that goes on after it. So I think that is top shelf, multi-platform, real-time experience. It builds depth with your guests, with your audience, because they get to see you, they get to know you. A video is a next best thing, but there's nothing better than seeing the person you can say they're tall, they're short, they're taller than I thought, they're shorter than it's just amazing. And it will show that the audience trusts the host. It's amazing. And I'm telling you, it's going to carry a lot of intellectual weight.
Yeah. That's what I really wanted to tie in with what you're doing, because that credibility aspect. If you're doing a live show, even at a small theater like this, if you tell people I'm going to be on the main stage at the Poduty Podcast Theater, that adds a ton of credibility. And what Dr. Trudy's building with the PSI TV network, if you're on a show that's on that network, or you host a show, or you want to run your show on that network, that too is a way to add credibility to what you're building and showing. So these live events are very similar to having a show on TV on a network. And I really think that's a great parallel between live performances and what you're building.
Well, let's give some kudos as well to Shankar Vedantam, because he does have that NPR background, so that is a carryover of his experience and that connection to a very strong brand that's carrying over into this experience. So for sure.
We'll keep it moving. And my next two stories, I've really been sitting on these two for a little bit. I think Dr. Trudy is going to be a perfect perspective on this. And podcasters, as somebody who's an old school DIY podcaster guy who believes strongly in independent media, who believes still that a podcast is a MP3 file distributed by an RSS feed to an aggregator app to some sort of application where people can download it on demand. There's a lot of changes happening in what we're considering a podcast or what a podcast could be. And the first one we're going to talk about has been getting a lot of media attention, and it's Substack. Wants your podcast on the big screen, and they're launching a TV app for video podcasts and live streams. They're going to give distribution to creators who are already distributing video on the platform, and they're going to try to compete directly with YouTube and Spotify and tap into that 700 million podcast hours that were streamed on TVs in a single month. And the one thing people may not realize is live streaming on TV has surpassed the voice-activated machines in the house. So people are going from their small devices. 10 years ago, it was the iPod. Now it's the phones. And they're skipping over voice-activated devices and going right to the TVs. And Substack here is another example of another media company tapping into video podcasts.
Well, Jeff, YouTube just put out data very recently that their TV viewing has exceeded their mobile app and their people viewing on mobile devices. The viewership from a television machine has exceeded. So it is creating a buzz everywhere and everybody's jumping on train. But I have been saying for years about podcasters moving to TV. In fact, that was one of my first target audiences because I saw the writing on the wall, podcast to TV, and it's happening in real time. YouTube exceeded Spotify a long time ago for podcast exposures and viewership and downloads, much less, I mean, to think that Spotify is in second or third to YouTube. And now, of course, Substack is going to jump on. Of course they are. Absolutely they are. And the thing is that when your content is on TV, I promise you, when you say to someone, catch me on TV, the eyebrows go up in a different way. Even though the TV is maybe YouTube, it's just something. There's something about the TV proximity, the TV perception that it just carries weight. It does.
Yeah, it adds so much credibility. I think here's what I tend to boil it down to. A lot of times you start a podcast and you start telling your friends and family, and they understand, like, okay, that's a podcast, and you're doing that. That's nice and cute. And you may be at Thanksgiving dinner, you might open up their phone and show them your podcast on their phone, and then secretly subscribe. And they're like, okay, well, I'll pretend like I'm supporting you. But when you say, hey, my podcast is going to be on television, or my podcast is going to be on the main stage at the local theater, that's something that's very tangible to your audience, to your friends, to your family, to your fans.
They take it seriously at that point. You're no longer just playing a game. You've moved to the serious level, and it's like going from weekend warrior to pro athlete.
Exactly. It's exactly what Dr. Trudy's talking about. It really gives a whole new level of credibility to what you're producing. People understand television, they understand radio, they understand live performances much more than I'm just recording this episode in my basement. Now you're going to be on the stage. Maybe it's even at a local event or a conference invited you to speak and perform your show live as part of the entertainment. That's something that everybody understands. And that's taking podcasting from this niche little industry to mainstream media, to big broadcast media. It immediately puts you on that same playing field.
It's content and context elevation. Absolutely.
I love it. And we got another story coming in. This one's a little different than the Substack one. This one is Hulu. Hulu wants you to watch video podcasts on Hulu, and they do something a little different where Hulu does tie in a lot of their shows that they produce. They also produce podcasts, little behind-the-scenes tidbits, little stories about the casting and the crew and backstories of some of the characters. And they're building this other thing. We see HBO doing that a lot. You might watch Game of Thrones, and it says, stay tuned after, or subscribe to the podcast after the Game of Thrones. And they're licensing this full content to stream on their platform first, which is important, but then they're also distributing it to other platforms, which is something we're not seeing the Netflixes do. We're not seeing Spotify do. They want to lock their content under these walled gardens. Hulu's approaching it a little bit differently, where they are going to use their proprietary shows that they're creating, but they are going to distribute that to other platforms. And I think that's going to be a big difference here. And we mentioned earlier that the smart TV podcast consumption is surpassing smart speakers. So when you just say, okay, Google, play Poduty in the news, that's not as big as searching for this podcast on YouTube. So to be able to see what Hulu's doing, we're seeing what Substack's doing. This is bringing a whole new level of, maybe not the level of podcasting that I'm doing here, this smaller independent, but it's elevating the medium to new levels. I think it's introducing it to new people and showing people that there's a lot happening in the podcast scene.
Jeff, this is huge because we talked earlier today about the whole rise of the indie experience, and it is people like you and I that are producing this kind of content that is finding its own audience base and getting attention from the big boys. And they're always searching for content. And it's no surprise that they turn to the podcasting world because these independent creators are going out there and coming up with content on a record level, with a bunch of creativity that those paid producers have just, burnt out over time. So I'm stoked about it.
That what you're talking about is one of the reasons I built this type of space. One is we know that major comedians and actors who have podcasts, we know that they're filling arenas and large theaters. And we know that most podcasters do record in a home studio, in their basement, maybe in an office studio, but there's nothing in between. So how do we get out of our home studio all the way to Madison Square Garden? We're going to need spaces to practice. We're going to need small theaters. We're going to need TV shows to build that credibility, to build that hosting muscle, to get us out of the home studio to small clubs, to the theaters. So I think spaces like what I'm building here, I think what Dr. Trudy offers, that type of experience will lift your podcast up. It'll give you new connections. It'll bring you a new audience, and it'll give you new skills to be able to host your show in front of a live audience, in front of 20,000 people maybe someday.
Well, also, Jeff, the larger the show, the more they are scrutinizing your history of media appearances, the more they want to see what you have done, where you have done it, the kind of audience you're attracting and all of that. And it stacks, it compounds over time. And yes, experiences lead to bigger experiences. And the person who is not documenting their continuous rise, keeping a media portfolio and all of that. So to my experience here will go on my media portfolio page to stack to and add to the compounding of all these appearances over time. Absolutely. Which just opens up bigger and bigger opportunities in time.
Yeah, you mentioned people are creating new types of content. These big places are looking for it. And our next story is one of the most unique stories I've seen for content creation. And I love this. This was a real-time test. So the GeekWire podcast, they did a live on-air test, a 30-minute test of Amazon's Now. It's called Amazon Now. It's a delivery service that does deliveries within 30 minutes. So what an idea for a podcast. You talk about what you're going to order, you order it, you set the ball in motion, and then you see if Amazon can deliver on it. I thought this was a very unique concept, one of those show and tell type shows where this is what they say they do, let's see if they do it. So the proof of concept, recording it live, rolling the dice, not knowing what's going to happen, not knowing if you're going to get a show with some products at the end. This is the type of content that I just fall in love with.
When you go live, in any case, you either bomb miserably before a whole bunch of people or you do really, really well. And because it's live, flaws and all, it's recorded, it feels more authentic. And so the trust factor really skyrockets. And when you can demonstrate something in real time, it's really, like you said, proof of concept at the highest level.
Yeah, just to rolling the dice on a whole, you could have a whole concept laid out, and it could go completely wrong.
It could bomb, yeah.
Or in this show, you do see the thumbnail where he's sitting there with his water, and it looks like a bag, and everything did arrive in the 30 minutes, but to go into a show not knowing the outcome, not knowing if it's going to work. It's one of the most beautiful things about live entertainment, about live podcasting. If it doesn't work, how do you carry the show forward? How do you get through those 30 minutes?
Well, I take my hat off to all the people who do that. I'm not one of those, not usually anyway, so yeah.
Well, let's keep it moving. We're going to go over to the Boombastic, Mr. Boombastic.
Yeah.
The Boombastic Health Product.
Mr. Boombastic, fantastic. And I'm from Jamaica, man, so he loved that word like plenty.
It's the boom. I'm not going to be able to say the word now. You're going to go into song and dance. The Boombastic Health Podcast will record live from the Diagnostic Zone at the Vive 2026 conference, positioning itself directly inside one of healthcare's most influential innovation hubs. And this is a great example of going where your audience is. And no matter what niche you're in, no matter what you talk about, what your podcast is about, there's probably some sort of gathering already in place. There's maybe a conference that's already happening. And this is a health podcast. Guess where they're going? They're going to a health conference, and they're going to be part of the entertainment, part of the show. They're going to be able to connect with other healthcare professionals, other people in the industry, do interviews, get more content for the rest of the year. And the people in the audience, they're already interested in what they're talking about. So this is a great example of where can you put your podcast in front of where your audience is already at.
I love this. I've done this at some level, but not at this experience, because this is a top shelf experience. I mean, being in the middle of an innovation hub and the proximity to all these leaders, proximity is huge, Jeff. And it's one of the reasons, like when people come to the PSI TV show and they are in the studio, they are on TV, that proximity there to the brand, to the host, to the guest, it is huge. And a lot of times, we'll see that we take a picture with, the speaker of something, or if you get an opportunity to take a picture with the president for the proximity is huge. So proximity to the space is elevating for the podcast as well. It can almost be seen as an industry endorsement. This is brilliant. And I mean, one of the things we do is we will go to where our audience is, but we go for different reasons. But this is amazing.
Yeah, on the check boxes that Dr. Trudy and I have given you of positioning yourself as an expert, doing live shows, getting on television, and going to conferences where other experts are. If you can bring other experts onto your show, that also will give credibility to your show. If you're in the middle of a 2,000, 3,000 people conference and you're able to perform your show live, that's 2,000 people that just found out about you, who also are already interested in the things that you're talking about. So don't just think about how do you perform your own show in a bar or a restaurant, but where are the industry headed? Where do they hang out? Where do they get together annually? Is there a retreat? Is there a conference? And that's where you need to start to think about positioning your podcast. Speaking of positioning, what better place to position yourself than on a 143-foot screen? This is Circa Mania is going to Circa Resort and Casino, and it's turning a WrestleMania event into a full media hub for 5 days. It's going to blend podcasts, art exhibits, superstar appearances, massive watch parties at a place called Stadium Swim, and that place has a 143-foot wide screen. So you imagine performing a show on a screen that size, and it's this multi-day event. It's coinciding with WrestleMania. They're going to bring on wrestling personalities. They're blending in the audience, the live stream energy, and fan engagement. This is something where they've built up something. Obviously, wrestling is just bigger than we'll ever be, but it's that community getting together, celebrating the thing they love. So that's kind of the lesson I want to take from this story is, whatever you're passionate about, bring those people together, and maybe someday you'll be on a 143-foot screen.
Well, I mean, you can also make it yourself, but this is layered. This is a layered experience. This is content in layers. I mean, this is huge. This is ecosystem thinking, because each thing is feeding to the other. I mean, you'll get the person who is interested in the wrestling suddenly watching this other thing. It's amazing. I operate in ecosystem, so I get this. This is the way to go.
This is like a little TV programming, because this is obviously tying in with WrestleMania happening, but different days, there's different podcasts at different times doing different shows. So there is a little bit element of programming, and it's already part of this event that you're already immersed in. You're already in Vegas. You're already going to be for WrestleMania. You go a day or two earlier, you get this extra layer of experience that you wouldn't get just going to the matches. Well, the one thing I always warn my guests is this goes so fast. That was already story number 6. Dr. Trudy Beerman, thank you so much. CEO of PSI TV Network, REACHology. One last time, I'd like to turn the stage over. Please plug, promote, talk about anything you'd like. The floor is yours.
So one of the things I really would like to share with your audience, Jeff, is, we're out there, we're doing podcasting, we're doing TV. What we're really doing, we're in a content space. And a lot of times our guests are overwhelmed with the whole content concept. It feels overwhelming. And social media posting, I call that digital dots. But when you talk about the algorithm, a lot of people say, oh, the algorithm shadow banned me. People don't understand what the algorithm is. And the algorithm is simply the way that the internet figures out what to recommend. So we have trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of what I call digital dots, content pieces, trillions and trillions and trillions. And then what happens is somebody puts in a search on Google, on Bing, on ChatGPT, whatever. They ask a question, and then the algorithm attempts to go out to these trillions and trillions and trillions of content pieces to look for what's the most recent. It's not going to send up an old piece if there's a more recent piece. What is the most relevant? And which of all of these things is it going to recommend? So what happens is when you're doing these content pieces, if you're just looking for virality, okay, so you did a prank and it got a lot of attention. But if you're an expert, that's not going to get you the gig. That's not going to get you the contract. That's not going to get you hired. So for the audience that is of the expert level, you're not going to be just chasing virality, guys. You want to be seen and respected for the expertise that you have. You need to do more than just create these posts, these digital dots. You need to create what I call authority signals so that when these questions are asked and the systems go out to look for the answer, your content is solid and has a better chance of being offered up as a solution to someone's problem.
Oh my goodness, it's so important to get those dots connected, or even
Dots
get those
connected, yep.
get the dots placed so that when people do the search, you may have 5 dots that pertain to that search, and you become the most relevant person for that search. And I love that the way to think about that in terms of little dots. And then when people are looking for you, you want to have the most dots relevant to that search. I think there's no better way to position yourself as an expert than to think about it that way. Think about putting these dots online. And I only have one plug I like to do. I have a theater space, and if you like live podcasting, if you like what we're doing here, come on down. No contract, no minimum ticket sales. I'll sell tickets for you. I'll record the show, give you back the recording. It's your audio. I don't take any ownership over it. And at the end of the night, we split the door 50-50 at the Poduty Podcast Theater, PODUTY.com. This has been Poduty in the News for Tuesday, February 24th, 2026. We'll see you on Saturday.
What time is it?